Mercy Hollow heard the crowd cheering for justice, until the rope snapped and she hit the dirt breathing. Now half the town thinks she's God's chosen, and the other half wants to finish the job. The sun beat down on Redemption Gulch, baking the dust into a hardpan that cracked under the weight of the crowd. Every eye was fixed on the gallows. Mercy Hollow stood on the platform, her hands bound, a rough-spun noose around her neck. She was small, almost swallowed by the oversized dress they'd given her. Her face was pale, but her chin was held high. Sheriff Clem, a man whose belly strained against his starched shirt, read the charges in a voice that cracked with nerves. He accused Mercy of the cold-blooded murder of Jedediah Smith, a respected rancher. Mercy hadn't spoken much in her defense, only muttered something about self-defense, about Jedediah being drunk and angry. The jury hadn't believed her. A hush fell over the crowd as the sheriff finished. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Mercy closed her eyes, picturing her ma's face, her little brother, Billy. She whispered a prayer, a plea for forgiveness, though she wasn't sure what she was being forgiven for. The trapdoor creaked open. Mercy dropped, but instead of the sickening snap of a broken neck, there was a sharp crack. The rope, thick as a man's wrist, had broken. Mercy landed hard on the dusty ground, gasping for air, the broken rope dangling uselessly above her. A collective gasp rose from the crowd, a wave of disbelief washing over Redemption Gulch. Silence hung heavy in the air, thicker than the dust. Sheriff Clem stared, his mouth agape, at the broken rope. He'd overseen a dozen hangings in his time, and nothing like this had ever happened. He fumbled for his pistol, then seemed to remember himself and awkwardly holstered it. Mercy lay on the ground, coughing, her throat raw. She blinked against the harsh sunlight, trying to understand what had just happened. Was she alive? Was this some kind of cruel trick? She touched her neck, feeling the imprint of the rope, a burning reminder of her near demise. A murmur rippled through the crowd. "A sign," someone shouted. "It's a sign from above." Old Man Hemlock, the town's self-proclaimed prophet, raised his gnarled hands to the sky. "Divine intervention, the Lord has spared her. She's innocent, I tell you, innocent." Others took up the cry. The shock of the broken rope had loosened their tongues, releasing doubts they'd kept hidden. Maybe Mercy was innocent. Maybe the jury had been wrong. Maybe, just maybe, Redemption Gulch was about to witness a miracle. But not everyone was convinced. Jeb Callahan, Jedediah's oldest son, stood like a thundercloud at the edge of the crowd, his face twisted with rage. He spat on the ground. "Miracle is it? That rope just wasn't strong enough. She's a killer and she'll pay for what she did." His brothers, Caleb and Silas, flanked him, their eyes narrowed, their hands twitching at their sides. The Callahans wanted their justice, and a broken rope wasn't going to stop them. The whispers started subtly, like the rustling of leaves before a storm. They began with "Did you see that?" and quickly escalated to "Maybe she's innocent." Saloon patrons argued over watered-down whiskey, their voices rising with each shot. The womenfolk gathered at the general store traded theories with worried glances. Was it divine intervention, a second chance granted by a merciful God, or simply a faulty rope, a tragic accident magnified by superstition? The most radical suggestion came from Maggie, the saloon owner, a woman known for her sharp tongue and even sharper business sense. "If she's strong enough to survive a hanging, maybe she's strong enough to be our sheriff," she declared, slamming her fist on the counter. Sheriff Clem, everyone knew, was getting old, slow, and more interested in napping in his office than keeping the peace. Redemption Gulch needed someone tough, someone who wouldn't back down from the Callahans, someone who understood what it was like to be an outsider. The idea spread like wildfire. Some saw it as a practical solution, a way to fill a leadership vacuum. Others saw it as a way to thumb their noses at the Callahans, a defiant act of solidarity. A few perhaps even saw it as a chance for redemption, not just for Mercy, but for the town itself. Could they forgive a woman accused of murder? Could they trust someone who had stood on the edge of death? The question hung heavy in the air, as uncertain and unpredictable as the desert wind. Mercy sat huddled in a cell, the same one she'd occupied before the hanging, only now it felt different, charged with a strange energy. She couldn't make sense of what had happened. One minute she was staring into the abyss, the next she was coughing up dust, alive but utterly bewildered. She remembered the fight with Jedediah, or rather, fragments of it. The saloon smoky and loud. Jedediah's face red and contorted with anger, his words slurred and threatening. He'd grabbed her, his grip tight and painful. She'd pushed him away, grabbed the nearest object, a heavy glass bottle, and swung. She remembered the sickening thud, Jedediah falling, and then nothing, just a blur of panic and confusion. Had it been self-defense? She honestly couldn't say for sure. The memories were hazy, clouded by fear and adrenaline. Maybe she had overreacted, maybe she could have run away, but Jedediah had been so big, so strong. The thought of becoming sheriff was absurd. She was no law woman, no hero. She was just Mercy Hollow, a woman caught in a terrible situation, a woman who couldn't even remember exactly what she'd done. How could she protect a town when she couldn't even protect herself? The weight of the town's expectations, the Callahan's hatred, and her own uncertainty pressed down on her, heavier than any rope. Jeb Callahan slammed his fist on the rough-hewn table, rattling the tin cups and scattering dust. "Enough is enough," he roared, his voice echoing in the small, dimly lit Callahan ranch house. Caleb and Silas nodded grimly, their faces mirroring his fury. "That woman killed Pa," Jeb continued, his eyes blazing. "The law failed us. That broken rope, that's just a stroke of bad luck. It doesn't change nothing." Silas, the youngest and most impulsive of the brothers, spoke first. "We should just take her," he said, his voice low and menacing. "Take her out to the desert. No one would ever know." Jeb shook his head. "No, that's what she'd expect. We need to be smarter than that. We need to make her pay, and we need to do it in a way that sends a message to everyone in this town: you don't cross the Callahans." Caleb, the most calculating of the three, leaned forward. "The election for sheriff is coming up soon," he said slowly. "Let's make sure she doesn't get that job. Let's remind everyone what she really is, a murderer." He paused, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "And if that doesn't work, well, accidents happen." The three brothers exchanged a dark look. The rope may have failed to deliver justice, but the Callahans were far from finished. They would make Mercy Hollow pay, one way or another. Their father's death would be avenged. Redemption Gulch would learn that the Callahans were not to be trifled with. The whispers of miracles and second chances meant nothing to them. Only vengeance mattered. Redemption Gulch was no longer a single town, but two separate camps divided by fear, suspicion, and the long shadow of the gallows. On one side were those who whispered about miracles and divine intervention, those who dared to believe that Mercy might be innocent, those who saw in her survival a chance for a fresh start. They offered her hesitant smiles, whispered words of encouragement, and openly glared at the Callahans whenever they dared to venture into town. On the other side stood the Callahan supporters. Ranchers who owed them favors, townsfolk intimidated by their wealth and power, and those who simply believed in an eye for an eye. They gathered at the saloon, their voices low and menacing, their eyes filled with resentment. They ostracized anyone who dared to speak favorably of Mercy, spreading rumors and sowing discord. The general store owner, Mr. Abernathy, found his business dwindling as Callahan loyalists boycotted his establishment, favoring the mercantile in the next town over. Sheriff Clem, caught in the middle, wrung his hands in despair. He was too old, too weak to control the rising tension. He tried to maintain order, but his efforts were met with indifference or outright hostility. Redemption Gulch was teetering on the brink of chaos, and Clem knew with a sinking feeling in his gut that it wouldn't take much to push it over the edge. The only question was, what would be the spark, and when would it ignite? Sheriff Clem shuffled into Mercy's cell, his face etched with worry. He cleared his throat, the sound raspy in the small space. Mercy, he began, avoiding her gaze. The town, they're talking. What? Mercy remained seated on the cot, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She already knew what they were talking about. Well, some of them think you should be the new sheriff. Clem finally met her eyes, his expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. I'm not getting any younger, Mercy. This town needs someone strong, someone who can stand up to the Callahans. Mercy shook her head. Sheriff, I'm no law woman. I don't even know if I'm innocent. How can I possibly be sheriff? Clem sighed. Maybe this is a chance for you to prove it. To prove your innocence, not just to the town, but to yourself. Besides, he added with a wry smile, who else is going to do it? Jeb Callahan's already announced his candidacy. Do you really want him running this town? The thought of Jeb Callahan as sheriff sent a chill down Mercy's spine. He would rule with an iron fist, using his power to settle old scores and punish anyone who had ever crossed him. The town would become a Callahan fiefdom. I don't know, Sheriff, Mercy stammered. I need time to think. Clem nodded. Take all the time you need, Mercy, but don't wait too long. This town needs you, whether you believe it or not. He turned and shuffled out of the cell, leaving Mercy alone with her doubts and fears. The weight of Redemption Gulch rested squarely on her shoulders, a weight she wasn't sure she could bear. The next morning, Mercy emerged from her cell, blinking against the bright sunlight. She'd barely slept, her mind racing with doubts and fears. But something had shifted within her. Sheriff Clem's words had resonated, a seed of determination planted in the fertile ground of her uncertainty. Maggie, the saloon owner, was waiting for her, arms crossed, a knowing look on her face. Well, Mercy, have you made up your mind? Mercy took a deep breath. I'll do it, she said, her voice surprisingly firm. I'll run for sheriff. A smile spread across Maggie's face. That's the spirit. Now the first thing we need to do is get you out of that dress and into something a little more sheriff-like. But beneath the newfound resolve, doubt lingered. She knew the Callahans wouldn't make it easy. They would fight her every step of the way, using every dirty trick in the book, and she still didn't know if she was truly innocent. How could she lead a town when she was still haunted by the shadows of her past? That afternoon, Mercy stood before Jedediah Smith's grave, the dry wind whipping her hair around her face. She knelt down and placed a single wildflower on the weathered headstone. I don't know what happened that night, Jedediah, she whispered, but I promise you I'm going to find out the truth, for you, for me, and for this town. She wasn't just running for sheriff, she was searching for redemption. Mercy, now sporting a worn leather vest and a borrowed Stetson, started her investigation where it all began, the saloon. The air was thick with smoke and suspicion as she walked in, every eye turning to watch her. She ignored the stares and approached Maggie behind the bar. Maggie, I need to know everything you remember about the night Jedediah died. Maggie wiped down the counter, her expression guarded. Mercy, honey, that was a bad night for everyone. Best left forgotten. I can't forget it, Maggie. I need to know the truth. Maggie sighed. Jedediah was drunk, Mercy, real drunk. He'd been losing money at cards all night. He was angry, looking for someone to blame. He started saying things, nasty things. Mercy pressed her, what kind of things? Maggie hesitated. Things about you, about your ma, things I don't want to repeat. She paused, then lowered her voice. And he wasn't just angry at you, Mercy. He was angry at a lot of people. He'd been having trouble with some business deals, something about land and water rights. He'd been arguing with a man named Silas, not one of his brothers. Mercy frowned. Silas. Do you know who he was arguing with? Maggie shook her head. Just some drifter, came through town a few weeks back, but Jedediah was real mad, said Silas was trying to cheat him. A new piece of the puzzle. Jedediah Smith, the respected rancher, involved in shady deals and arguments. Maybe there was more to the story than she'd been led to believe. Maybe she wasn't the only one with secrets. This was only the beginning. The Callahan Ranch loomed in the distance, a sprawling testament to their wealth and power. Mercy hesitated, a knot forming in her stomach. Confronting them directly was risky, but she needed answers. As she approached the main house, Jeb emerged, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. "What do you want, Hollow?" he snarled. "I'm investigating Jedediah's death," Mercy replied, her voice steady despite her apprehension. "I need to ask you some questions." Jeb laughed, a harsh, mirthless sound. "You think you're going to find something we don't know? You killed him plain and simple." "Did you know your father was arguing with someone named Silas about land and water rights?" Mercy asked, watching his reaction closely. Jeb's eyes narrowed. "Silas, never heard of him, you're making things up." But Mercy saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, a brief betrayal of his carefully constructed facade. "Was your father having trouble with his business?" Mercy pressed. "Or was he in debt?" Jeb stepped closer, his voice low and threatening. "Get off our land, Hollow, before you regret it." Suddenly Caleb and Silas appeared, flanking Jeb. They were armed. Mercy knew she was outnumbered, outgunned. But she also knew she was onto something. The Callahans were hiding something. "I'm not leaving," Mercy said, standing her ground. "Not until I get the truth." Before Jeb could respond, a shot rang out, shattering the tense silence. The bullet whizzed past Mercy's head, narrowly missing her. "Next time I won't miss," Jeb growled. Mercy knew it was time to leave, but she left with a newfound determination. She was getting closer to the truth, and the Callahans were desperate to stop her. The attack came at dawn. Mercy was asleep in Sheriff Clem's office, the only place she felt safe, when the windows shattered. Gunfire erupted, filling the small room with smoke and the acrid smell of gunpowder. "Callahans!" Clem shouted, scrambling for his rifle. Mercy grabbed her own weapon, a Colt revolver she'd borrowed from Maggie. They were pinned down, outnumbered. The Callahans were determined to finish what the rope had started. But the Callahans had underestimated the town. The sound of gunfire galvanized Redemption Gulch. Men and women, armed with rifles and shotguns, emerged from their homes and businesses, ready to defend their town and their new sheriff. Maggie led the charge, a shotgun in her hands and a fierce glint in her eyes. "For mercy!" she yelled, her voice cutting through the chaos. The battle raged through the dusty streets. The Callahans, caught off guard by the town's resistance, found themselves fighting a losing battle. They retreated to the edge of town, taking cover behind wagons and buildings. Mercy, using her knowledge of the town to her advantage, flanked the Callahans, picking them off one by one. She moved with a speed and precision she didn't know she possessed. Finally, only Jeb remained, his face contorted with rage and desperation. He stood in the middle of the street, a smoking gun in his hand. "This isn't over, Hollow," he screamed. "I'll get you for this." Mercy leveled her revolver, her hand steady. "It is over, Jeb," she said, her voice calm and resolute. "It's time for you to face justice." The showdown had come. Redemption Gulch held its breath, waiting to see who would emerge victorious. Before Mercy could fire, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Silas, the drifter Maggie had mentioned. He stepped into the street, his face pale and drawn. "Stop," he cried, his voice trembling. "Don't shoot, I'll tell you everything." Jeb glared at him, his face a mask of betrayal. "You traitor." Silas ignored him, his eyes fixed on Mercy. "Jedediah hired me to scare off some homesteaders who were settling on his land," he confessed. "He wanted to control all the water in the valley, but I got greedy. I tried to cheat him, demand more money." "What?" He paused, taking a shaky breath. "That night at the saloon we argued. He threatened to kill me. I ran, but I saw him grab Mercy. I heard him say things, terrible things. He was going to hurt her." "What?" Mercy's memories flooded back, clearer now. Jedediah's rage, his threats, his violent grip. She remembered the fear, the desperation, the instinct to protect herself. It had been self-defense. He came at me, Mercy said, her voice filled with emotion. I didn't mean to kill him, I just wanted him to stop. Jeb, his plan unraveling, lunged at Sela's, but Mercy was faster. She disarmed him with a swift movement, her revolver pointed at his chest. It's over, Jeb, she said. The truth is out. Your father was a liar and a bully, and you've been protecting his lies for too long. The townspeople, who had been watching in stunned silence, began to murmur their agreement. They had seen the truth in Silas's eyes, in Mercy's face. They had been wrong about her. Jeb, defeated and humiliated, dropped his head in shame. Mercy had won not just the battle, but the war for the truth. The dust settled over Redemption Gulch, revealing a town scarred but not broken. The Callahans were gone, their power and influence shattered. Jeb and his brothers were taken into custody, facing charges for attempted murder and conspiracy. Silas, though an accomplice to Jedediah's schemes, was granted leniency in exchange for his testimony. The townspeople gathered around Mercy, their faces filled with gratitude and respect. They had misjudged her, doubted her, even condemned her, but she had proven them wrong. She had faced down the Callahans, uncovered the truth, and protected their town. The election for sheriff was a formality. Mercy won by a landslide. She stood before the town, the setting sun casting a long shadow behind her. She was no longer the frightened woman who had stood on the gallows. She was Sheriff Mercy Hollow, protector of Redemption Gulch, but even as she accepted their cheers, a sense of unease lingered. Jedediah Smith had been a powerful man, a pillar of the community. His death, though justified, had exposed a dark underbelly to Redemption Gulch. The town had been built on secrets and lies, on the exploitation of the weak and the suppression of the truth. Could Mercy truly change things? Could she bring justice and fairness to a town steeped in corruption? Or would she simply become another cog in the machine, another guardian of the status quo? Only time would tell. But as Mercy looked out at the faces of her townspeople, she knew one thing for sure: the fight for Redemption Gulch had just begun. The broken rope had given her a second chance, not just to live, but to make a difference. And she wouldn't waste it.